Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Word in Your Attic. We're delighted to be joined by John Dredge. Hello, John. Where do we join you?
Well, you join me in this rambling bedroom deep in the heart of Buckinghamshire, land of places and things.
How are you getting on during this curious time?
Yeah, good. I mean, it was a big adjustment to go from doing gigs and shows and running around in London and then not doing it at all. But it's been good creatively. Yeah, I've been listening to the Archers.
Dave and I were just talking about this. What have they done to the Archers? This is a travesty. It's a national outrage.
Yeah.
The monologues.
I know, yeah. I mean, I said to my dad, they seem to have run out of episodes. And he just said, oh, they can stick some old ones on, that's fine.
Well, you see, I would be quite happy to hear Tom Forrest and all these characters from the past, rather than listening to David Archer talking to himself, you know, revealing his inner life. But you, on your podcast, there's a certain amount of pastiching of Radio 4, isn't there? Which, of course, the Archers is the kind of go-to comedy, isn't it, really? There's such a rich tradition of people taking the mickey out of the Archers.
It's great because everybody knows it. Everybody knows what it's like, so they can all hopefully laugh at it. I mean, our version of it included a disco version of the Archers theme tune, which you could really on down to. And the idea was the characters had forgotten who was who. And so there was a long discussion about what had happened to who and what the hell they were all doing in the first place. You know, it got very, very complicated.
Well, yeah, this may be the situation they're in at the moment. I can't imagine how they're going to resume normal life in any way in the Archers, having made this bizarre departure into soliloquies. I can't say it at all.
Could this be the end of the Archers as we know it?
Yeah, well, you see, there's my theory. I think a lot of habits are going to be broken by this. We'll have to watch out and see if the Archers is one of those habits.
But it is technically possible, isn't it? As with the three of us talking now, they could be recording dialogue. They could be recording loads of people talking and just tightening it up in the edit. And there's no reason to abandon that, is there? Just go for these soliloquies.
Well, it seems a bit odd to me. It certainly seems odd. So
I think they should do a best of the Archers, you know, take all of the episodes and then just condense them down to a really interesting 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, that's one solution, possibly. So, John, have you brought along any objets to show and tell in this curious time? Go on. Yeah. What have you got?
So this record always brings a smile to my face. Are you aware of this record?
Oh, the world's worst record ever. World's worst record show.
Oh, yes, indeed. It's Kenny Everett. Absolutely. There's so much Kenny Everett in your podcast. Was he a major hero then?
Yeah, absolutely was. And this record is fascinating because I don't know if people know about it, but he was playing a terrible record on his show one day. And the engineer said to him, you should do a show of awful records. So he went on the air and said, I've just had this great idea. Why don't you send me all your awful records and we'll do a bottom 30? And this is it. And,
I think I even know the winner. But I won't spoil I think I've got that record somewhere. I think I know the winner. Go on.
Well, it's a fascinating series of tracks because my favourite bad song is Spinning Wheel by Mel and Dave. And the reason for that is the song's quite nice and the arrangement's very nice, but the vocals are a semitone out of tune for the whole thing. Which to me makes it a very funny and terrible but great record. And also Jess Conrad is on this twice.
Oh, what an honour.
This is like winning the Bad Sex Award, isn't it? It's a major... Yeah.
I actually won that. But Jess Conrad is on this twice. Apparently this record revitalised his career.
Oh, right. So are we talking about the legendary This Pullover?
Yeah.
That you bought for me. I will wear it for eternity or something. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, it's very memorable in an awful sort of way. And people started turning up at his gigs after listening to Everett and hearing this. There are some great. I mean, there's a track by the legendary Stardust Cowboy on here who influenced David Bowie of all people. And I think I'm right in saying that at Bowie's meltdown, he got him out of retirement. Heaven knows what that was like.
Is that a track called Paralysed?
Yeah, one of the worst tracks you'll ever hear. And what I like about this record is it sort of promotes itself on the front. Cringe along with us and listen to some of the most tasteless sounds around. Pain can be fun.
Because that is another of those objects, and we've had quite a few of these during a show and tell, lockdown show and tell, that existed before the internet. So if you wanted to hear This Pullover by Jess Conrad in whenever that record came out, the 70s or probably the early 80s, you had to wait until somebody got round to doing a thing like a record like that. You couldn't just find it on YouTube. Nobody was going to send it to you, were they? I kind of missed that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And this must be the only album ever released on Yuck Records.
Wasn't it? I'm going further. Isn't there a particular hue to the vinyl?
Yes.
I think you're going to have to show us. Yes, I think it was the only. Go on. Oh, my
Good Lord. Again, that's absolutely as tasteless as you can get, isn't it? Perfect.
As Everett would have said, it's a huey green colour. But yeah, look, another interesting thing, the Fall covered I'm Going to Spain, which is on this. So it's a sort of strangely influential record, you know.
So who did I'm Going to Spain? Who was responsible for the original?
Steve Bent, who of course later went on to do absolutely nothing.
Were they all people who were trying to be deliberately bad, or were they? Presumably, how did they feel about their careers being rebooted by being on an album like that?
Well, Jess Conrad was happy about it, but I don't. The thing about it was, I think they all thought they were making acceptable records, and everyone else knew they weren't. I guess they were trying to make some sort of money out of it, or trying to develop another pathway.
But do you think also the key thing is they were all flops? Whereas had any of them been a hit, you can no longer have it on the world's worst records. You know what I mean? It only works because you haven't heard it before. And so it's kind of emblematic of all the millions of efforts to have hit records that don't quite work. It's like abandoned jokes or something like this, isn't it? You know, it's extraordinary stuff. Extraordinary. Oh, that's brilliant.
What else have you got there? Any old magazines? Any old posters?
Yeah.
Singles?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big pop culture junkie, vintage stuff I like, and particularly this sort of thing. This is...
looking.
Wow.
Who's that on the cover?
Well, it's Debbie Harry looking at Buck Rogers.
Oh, my Lord.
The strange world of looking.
Yeah. What I like about the covers is that you've got completely disparate people on in the same sort of painting, so it looks like they're collaborating in some strange way. Like you might have Wurzel Gummidge and a couple of Cylons from Battlestar Galactica looking like they're in the same show.
You see,
which is a very early form of Photoshop, really.
It really is. It's really interesting. If you look at the big American teen magazine of the 60s, 16, they only ever had tiny heads of Herman's Hermits or Paul McCartney or whatever, very often on the bodies of stick figures who are playing cartoon characters on a desert island or being chased by monkeys or whatever. That was the way they did really early teen magazines. They made them like comics, you know. You built those people into your fantasy world. You didn't photograph them as they were. You introduced them into your world. So that's what Looking was still doing then. Of course, we drove them out of business, Mark, didn't we, eventually?
Well, as in smash hits, you mean?
Smash hits. Smash hits drove Looking out.
We did for Looking and Disco 45 and all the others, didn't we? Disco Fever.
Chart Songwords.
Where are they now? Flexi.
Where are they now?
Yeah. And indeed, where's Smash Hits for that matter?
Yes. He lives in a tiny little house. I've been parked outside.
Do you know of a magazine called Zigzag?
Oh,
Yeah, well, I wrote for it once,
grief. Yeah. Go on.
I mean, yeah, in this looking, they've got like a big page about Tiswas on 2, which I was a massive fan of.
Right.
But now it seems, extremely kitsch. But I saw this scan of Zigzag from about 1980, and the #1 TV show in their chart was Tiswas.
Well,
And
it was.
that's
Yeah.
surprising,
Well, it was kind of. It was Saturday morning telly. Used to be watched by kind of students and stoners, didn't it? That was, before we had millions of channels where you could watch any old garbage you want any hour of the day or night. There were very few opportunities, and so yes, Tiswas was kind of, it was hip with long hairs and
the same for
rock stars,
SWAT Shop and Wide Awake Club and all that. It's people who've been up all night, wasn't it? It was just massively stoned.
Well, yeah, I think Tiswas had something slightly different because it was genuinely naughty at the time when very few things were. You felt they were going to do something, and they might do anything. And rock stars liked to be on Tiswas, didn't they? They liked the idea of having stuff thrown all over them or whatever. Yeah, no, so I'm not surprised
about it. There was a real sense of anarchy about it, I suppose, that was reflected in some of the music that they played. And I wish I had the Four Bucketeers album on me.
But, the Four Bucketeers. Because the other great star of Tiswas was, do you remember Bob Carroll-G's?
Oh, God, yeah, and Spit the Dog. Was
Spit
that the
Dog.
Yes.
It was the simplest, kind of, was it even a ventriloquist act? I don't know. It just basically held a dog which spat. That was the gag.
Yeah.
That was quite...
It worked. Since. But I mean, they had a tour. The Four Bucketeers went on tour. They went on Top of the Pops as well to do the Bucket of Water song, and they were told that they would be able to throw a small amount of water at the audience. So they went on. But unfortunately, once they got there, it was told that health and safety would not allow this. So they ended up throwing buckets of tinsel.
Oh, yes.
After that appearance, the record went down 20 places.
So who were the Four Bucketeers? Are we talking about Chris Tarrant?
Yeah.
Lenny Henry, would he have been one of them?
Oh, was he there?
He was hanging about, but he wasn't one of the main four.
So it must be Chris Tarrant, Sally James, surely.
Yeah. Bob Carroll-G's.
Bob Carroll-G's. John Gorman. John Gorman.
Oh, yeah, of course, John Gorman.
The main musical influence. And he's a sort of link to my next record.
My next record, go on.
Because, yeah. Do you know the link between, I'm sure you do, between John Gorman and this lot?
Oh, well, it's going to be a scaffold type. Yes.
Well, he was. John Gorman was in the scaffold.
He was in the scaffold.
Roger McGough and Mike McCarthy. Go on. So, what's the link with Gorilla?
Well, Gorman, Neil Innes produced the Four Bucketeers album.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and I was just that was a big influence on me. The Bonzo Dog Band. Mark, did you know Viv Stanshall quite well? Am I right in thinking that?
I did vaguely, but as we corresponded, we were going to get him to be the motoring columnist of Mojo magazine, and then he started writing to me and sent a series, which I still have, of extraordinary postcards in his wonderful italic script, usually from seaside towns, and they always talked about whelks and cockles and deck chairs. It was just so funny. Had that kind of humour of those kind of dirty seaside postcards in the 1950s. So I was kind of in touch with him. I talked to him a lot on the telephone. But I mean, this was the end of his life where he was slightly unravelling. It has to be, I remember my kids would occasionally answer the phone and say, "Dad, it's that weird man again." and I remember taking the phone off one of them and a voice said, "I've taken enough Valium to stun a rhinoceros." And that was Viv. But anyway, yeah, amazing.
I've just realised this is now the perfect medium for us to demonstrate Viv Stanchel's trick for making sure you got a railway carriage to yourself if you're travelling intercity. We tried explaining this loads of times, but this is the perfect medium. And I think we all know this joke, don't we? That Viv, when he got on a train, would go and find somewhere to sit, and to make sure nobody came and sat next to him, he'd stare out the window at the travellers coming down the platform to board, and he would beckon towards them. With the result that nobody ever came near him at all. So if you're ever looking for solitude on a train journey, that's the Viv Stanchel bequest.
Didn't he once get a load of old copies of a newspaper from a particular day and give them to all his friends, and they sat on the tube?
He made up a day, didn't he, or something like that?
Maybe made up a day. They're all reading a newspaper. Maybe it's a fictitious newspaper. People get on and think, what? And be really worried. I've wandered into some absolute science fiction nightmare. What a man. But they're a big influence. That's great.
When did you discover the Bonzo dog band, John? I'm trying to find out when, how old are you, frankly?
Very, very old. Very, very old, he said, doing a Lennon accent for no reason. Well, when did I first discover it? I probably heard I'm the Urban Spaceman, and I was sort of drawn into the sort of more melodic feeling. It might even have been the Ruttles, actually, and then I might have looked into that after hearing the Ruttles. Because I love musical pastiche and parody, and so then I think I saw that record in Smiths years ago, and put it on, and couldn't quite work out what the hell this Viv Stanchel bloke was all about. But it was similar to when I first heard the Goons or something. You have to sort of rearrange your mind a little bit to understand it. And then as soon as I did that, I loved it. It's a bit like Big Reeves or something. When you see him for the first time, you think, what's going on here? And then you realise you have to think in a different way to understand it. And I've always been fascinated by eccentrics, people like Ivor Cutler, who I met once very briefly. When I met him, he bought me a cup of tea, and he was extremely weird. I only met him for about 5 minutes, and in that time, he was one of the strangest people I've ever met, I think, because he gave me a sticker. He gave me a sticker and a badge, I think, and the sticker said, "Slightly imperfect."
Andy Kershaw once booked him for a college gig and rang him up and offered him 400 quid. And there was a long pause. He said, "Offer me less."
Yeah,
that's very odd. What's that about?
And actually, that leads me to the next item.
Go on, this is good.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'm reading this at the moment. Can you see that?
Oh yes,
John
indeed.
Peel,
Margrave of the Marshes. That was the autobiography he started, and his wife kind of vaguely finished, didn't she? The Peel.
Yeah.
Your impersonation of Peel the other day was absolutely fantastic. If I'm any judge, I'm surprised I didn't mention persons of Polish extraction. But give us some Peel, please.
Yeah, well, Danny, I've been doing these silly videos on Twitter, impressions.
I've seen them.
And Danny Baker requested one. He wanted me to do John Peel reciting Neighbours. And so I did it, and it got about 40,000 views for some reason. But yeah, I just sort of went, neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours. With a little understanding, you can find the perfect blend. Neighbours should be good to one another, and that's why good neighbours become good friends. Here's Haps Hash in the coloured coat. Now, I've never heard of Haps Hash in the coloured coat, but he wanted that at the end. And I believe that they've had quite a lot of publicity on your show since then. I still don't.
They have. We love them.
We always grasp for them when we're trying to think of a kind of obscure psychedelic group. We go Hapsash in the coloured coat, and then we had one of these where somebody had the Hapsash record. Who was it, Mark? I can't remember.
Remember somebody to dig out the sleeve, didn't they? Maybe it was
Danny.
Yeah,
No, Danny.
It was Danny.
It was Danny had it. Yeah.
John, you're going to have to give us the Marquis Smith, because that's been brilliant. You tweet these fantastic impersonations of Marquis Smith.
Oh yeah, I did. Marquis Smith sings the Wurzels. Bear in mind I had backing music with this. I got a brand new combine harvester. I'll give you the key. Come on down now, get together in our perfect harmony. That sort of thing.
It was brilliant. Absolutely
The
fantastic.
interesting thing about Peel is there are loads of very different impressions of Peel, but they're all equally good because there were different Peels, weren't they, at different stages?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Robin Ince does a different. He does an earlier Peel.
But it's no less good. But
Yeah, we had a peel off. We actually had a peel off on Twitter. It was extraordinary. Yeah. And Robin Ince recited "Home and Away" as a counter to "My Neighbours."
Very good. Was it, Mark, the old? You're talking about people of Polish extraction. It's certain expressions that just work. What's that?
God, no. I mean, I think his thing was that he used to. I've sat and watched him broadcast a few times, and my theory is that he just invented those phrases to give himself time, because he often hadn't thought what record he was going to play, and he'd just start wittering and go, "Well, if I'm any judge, and unless I'm entirely mistaken," with all these completely extraneous things that you insert into sentences you don't need, and he'd just witter on for ages, and then eventually find the record and put it on and play it, and it was just a way of filling time, and people got to love it, didn't they? You listen to the program just to hear him say those things.
But was the old story about his son going to do what's he doing, archaeology at university?
Oh, that was fantastic. Oh yeah, he was telling me about his son's bedroom, what a mess it was. He said, my son's doing archaeology at Liverpool University, which I think is entirely appropriate for somebody who seems to spend 100% of their life lying around in dust. And he's talking about what a mess the room was. He said, I'm surprised there hasn't been some form of infestation.
My favourite thing he ever said. He did this 5-hour TV show, Video Jukebox. It was like the history of videos. It was on BBC Two. And somebody wrote him a letter about it, which he read out. He said, you seemed a little bit stiff on the programme last night, John. He said, carved from the living rock would be a more appropriate observation. Which I loved. And another time he opened a letter. He said, here's a request for the Mekons, and I see that they've enclosed a 20p piece in the envelope. Yeah, I'm wondering if all the people that like the Mekons enclosed 20p, how much money would I have? 80p, I hear you cry. Here's a call. Because he got really annoyed with his imaginary audience at that point.
What else have you got there, John? Have you got anything else to show us?
Yeah, this is a great record. It's made lots.
Golden Hour series, they were great.
Now we've given the Pi Record Organisation a regular kicking, on these Word in Your Attic. They keep coming up, and I forget how many budget marks the Pi Record Group had. And Golden Hour is another one. I'd totally forgotten about that. Golden Guinea, Piccadilly, Marble Arch, Golden Hour. Go on.
I mean, this was the first time I ever heard of the Kinks. It was in a library in High Wycombe. As you say, there was no internet. So, a lot of people owe their local library a great deal, I think. I mean, I got this for like 50p out of the library or something. Never took it back. Don't tell anybody. But
has it still got the library's name on the back? Probably. Stolen from. Yeah.
Yeah. The fine is going to be considerable. But it was just like hearing all these songs all in one place for the first time, all in one go. It was like an overwhelming experience, And although this hasn't, and then I started looking into them. And the thing was, there was no internet, so I didn't really know anybody of my age that liked the Kinks. I couldn't find anybody that knew anything about them, I think in the NME they were having a rough time, if they were mentioned at all, when I first came across them. And obviously there were a lot of people listening because that became Britpop, I guess.
I suppose so, yeah. It's no, you used to have to go off and look in reference books to find out about groups like that, It was... it was obviously a huge shift when the internet comes along, and suddenly absolutely everything is there all the time.
It's so true, because it kept them alive, didn't it? Because once the enemy stopped talking about you, you kind of, in a sense, disappeared.
You disappeared.
Yeah.
And there was no
I mean,
oldies radio or anything like that to keep me going.
No, I mean, I found a cassette of the Village Green Preservation Society just on its own in Woolworths, I think. You know, and that was a big deal. Obviously, a lot of other people heard it, you know, my age, and they went on to form Blur and things like that. But it was just like one solitary cassette of that album. I thought, why have I never heard this before? None of the songs were hits. None of them were ever played on the radio. There was nowhere you could go to hear this stuff. So it was an interesting sort of personal journey.
Yeah. But that's the case you find increasingly nowadays, that the people hear pop music, first come to hear it long after it's happened, because that's just the nature of the way things spread around nowadays. You know, you might, and most people listening to the Kinks clearly have no recollection of it happening at the time. They've taken it on later on. It's extraordinary. So what are you most looking forward to doing when this bloody war is over, John?
Well, going and doing a gig. I don't know when that's going to happen. You know, who knows when theatres or even pubs are going to open again properly. Are people going to want to go and sit in a small room in a pub, crammed together, and, you know, watch comedy or music? You know, it's hard to say, isn't it? But that's something I'd really like to do.
Right.
So what about your group, John Dredge and the Plinths? You're still recording?
Yes, we're actually, that's one good thing. Yeah, I've been collaborating on songs, you know, over the internet, and that's been great. And you know, putting vocals to instrumental tracks other people are sending, that sort of thing. So that's really good. Yeah, so I've been enjoying that. Okay. I mean, the internet is incredible. Without it, where would we be? That's the thing. Yes. We wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't be here. It would have been a very different lockdown, wouldn't it?
Certainly.
We've all been reading Proust in another bad
Yeah,
moment.
we'd all be far better educated.
Yeah, far better educated.
But John, it's been lovely talking to you. Enjoy the rest of the day as best you can. And keep smiling. And we'll see you on the other side, as we say.